So, like many people, when I initially saw this trending to begin with, I thought because we'd had a big storm recently, I thought the tree had fallen over. That it had fallen over because of the storm. What a shame, but okay, it can be righted. It can be put right. It can be replanted, refirmed, etc. Not going to be a problem. Um, Nothing lost. However, like many people, to my absolute dismay, um, I've been to this part of Hadrian's Wall. It's probably one of the most famous parts of Hadrian's Wall because of this tree has been well cut down, vandalized. Is the best description really to use? Well, because that's what exactly happened, and we still don't know why this took place. But this was unfortunately probably one of the most deepest destructive acts of vandalism that has probably touched the country in quite some time. Lots of people have been here. This is probably one of the most photographed trees in the UK, if not probably in the world. If it's certainly on the top 10 list in the world, but certainly when it comes to the UK, the most photographed tree. So quite rightly, you are seeing a lot of people generally being really upset at this. And quite rightly so. It is a disaster from a heritage point of view. This tree was over 300 years old, probably a sapling in the reign of, I think, King George the First. So it's been around for quite a long time, and to unfortunately meet its end through, as far as we can tell, just a sheer act of just wanton vandalism. It's kind of depressing, kind of upsetting, really, and you can see that outpouring of grief everywhere that people have talked about this, all their experiences, all the photographs that have come out on Twitter and on Facebook, etc. People expressing their grief about all this, quite rightly so. And even the guy who was in charge of the park, if you've seen the interview that he gives about this, um, he starts to cry because it's such a sad event for him, something that he cared for and looked after for so long, just destroyed in a night. Now, from what we know so far, a 16-year-old boy has been arrested at this moment in time, but there's a lot of people saying it can't have just been this a random 16-year-old boy at this. A lot of people have been talking about how the cut on the tree is almost perfect. So it's someone who clearly knew what they were doing with that chainsaw when they did it. So I don't think it was just this 16-year-old boy. I think there would have been other people certainly involved in this as well. Why they did it, who knows? Maybe it was just pure vandalism. Maybe there was a reason behind it. We don't know. But then again, I suppose that's vandalism sometimes. People vandalize stuff just because they can. And that's of course the great shame about all of this. Um, However, I do want to tie this into something else that we probably need to talk a lot more about on this channel because I've mentioned it quite a few times, but of course it's worth discussing again. That is, of course, one of the areas that are responsible for helping to look after the site, of course, our National Trust. Probably one of the biggest UK organizations when it comes to looking after and the massive amounts of environment heritage sites in the UK. Ultimately, it's probably run by the National Trust. Very, very big for this. But the National Trust do own lots and lots of farmland and land that, if sold off, would be very valuable. But the National Trust has always resisted doing this because they know why they keep it. They keep it to maintain this land, to ensure that the UK's natural beauty is preserved. That is part of their mission, and that is what they have done. But of course, we have seen a couple of years ago made big during the culture war that, oh no, The Natural Trust is actually telling the history of this place. It's connected to slavery, which again, many of these places and people who owned these properties were linked to slavery. They made their wealth through slavery. That's how they got the wealth to build these magnificent country houses and estates. That's how they got their money. That's not really a secret. I don't understand why people are suddenly shocked that National Trust goes, yeah, people who own this place, yeah, they were involved in the slave trade. Again, it shouldn't be shocking, but of course, to the right, they were. And there was an attempt by an organization last year, which we talked about, called Restore Trust, who tried to take over the National Trust through an express purpose, because if they took it over, this hard right group would then, shall we say, sell off this valuable land to real estate developers, and who knows who else who might buy it, who would ultimately then just build on it. And if you've seen uh, Jacob Rees-Mogg, when he commented on the Sycamore Gap Tree, telling it was a massive act of vandalism, it was senseless. You saw in the comments a lot of people calling this guy a hypocrite. Why? Because he is backing a lot of these Restore Trust members to try and get them onto the board. Because when they're on the board, they can then vote to sell off this incredibly valuable land the National Trust is part of. And remember, they are doing this because even though there are lots of people as part of the National Trust, only about 2% of National Trust members actually vote in these elections. So it would be incredibly easy if you get a big campaign with lots of right wingers, tell them to, vote for these particular members. And last year, luckily, they were seen off. But the thing about these elections is they come around yearly, and they are trying this again, and they are trying it again in a big way. So if you do know anyone who is part of the National Trust, or you do join the National Trust, because you can join the National Trust now, tell them to vote. Warn them about this. Get them to vote for the other members who aren't part of Restore Trust. And make sure that you keep them far, far away from being on the board of the National Trust, because ultimately it could lead to stuff like this. And not just stuff on a small scale. We're talking stuff on a large scale. We're talking environmental vandalism, writ large. And that's why people were calling Jacob Rees-Mogg a hypocrite, because he was supporting these Restore Trust people who would see no problem in doing something like this, because, well, they've sold it off to a developer. Developer goes, yep, the tree's in the way, gone. So be careful. And if you do know anyone who's part of the National Trust, etc., warn them about this and tell them to vote. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.